The rushing waters of the North Platte River rose higher than anyone in the Nebraska Territory had seen in decades, threatening to devour everything in its path on that fateful spring morning in 1867. Olivia Gardner clutched her swollen belly as the wagon lurched beneath her, the wooden wheels spinning helplessly against the current that had seemed so shallow just moments before. Her husband Thomas had insisted they could ford the river despite the recent rains, a decision that would be his last. As the wagon tipped precariously, Olivia saw her husband swept away in an instant, his outstretched hand disappearing beneath the churning brown water before she could even scream his name. "Hold on." Olivia cried out to no one, her fingers digging into the side of the wagon as it began its terrible descent into the swollen river. 6 months pregnant, and now utterly alone, she closed her eyes and prayed for a miracle as the current pulled the wagon from the crossing and into the deeper channel. Zachary Keller had been tracking a wounded buck along the riverbank when he heard the splintering of wood and a woman's terrified scream cutting through the morning air. Dropping his rifle, the tall cowboy sprinted toward the sound, his boots kicking up mud as he ran. From the bluff overlooking the river, he saw the horrific sight, a wagon overturning in the swift current, and the pale face of a woman visible for just a moment before she was swallowed by the raging waters. Without hesitation, Zachary tore off his leather vest and boots. "Hang on," he shouted, though he doubted she could hear him over the roaring water. He dove from the embankment, his powerful body arcing through the air before slicing into the cold river below. The frigid water stole his breath, but Zachary fought against the current with long, powerful strokes. Debris from the shattered wagon swirled around him, a trunk, planks of wood, a child's doll spinning in a small whirlpool. Then he spotted her, golden hair splayed out in the water, one arm still clinging desperately to what remained of the wagon seat. Her eyes were closed, face deathly pale. Zachary reached her just as her fingers slipped from their precarious hold. He wrapped a strong arm around her waist, noticing the swell of her belly even through the sodden fabric of her dress. A wave of protectiveness surged through him as he realized she was with child. "I've got you," he gasped, though her eyes remained closed. Using all his strength, Zachary fought against the current, angling toward the shore where the river bent and slowed. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed in protest, but he refused to surrender to the river's pull. Not with 2 lives depending on his strength. After what seemed like an eternity, his boots scraped against the muddy river bottom. Dragging the unconscious woman onto the shore, Zachary laid her gently on her side and leaned close to her face, feeling for breath. There was nothing. "No," he growled, turning her carefully onto her back, mindful of her condition. He pressed against her chest, then breathed into her mouth as he'd once seen a doctor do to a drowned man in St. Louis. "Breathe, damn it!" Water suddenly burst from Olivia's mouth as she convulsed, coughing violently. Her eyes flew open, deep brown and filled with terror as she gasped for air. "The baby," she choked, her hands flying to her rounded belly. "My baby." "Lie still," Zachary instructed, his voice gentler now. "You're both safe." Olivia's eyes darted around wildly. "Thomas, my husband." Zachary's silence told her everything she needed to know. A broken sob escaped her throat as she struggled to sit up, her soaking dress clinging to her trembling form. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, helping her into a sitting position. "I only saw you in the water." "He was driving," she whispered, her voice hollow with shock. "The river. It looked shallow enough to cross. Then suddenly—" Her words dissolved into tears. Zachary removed his damp shirt and draped it over her shoulders. Though soaked himself, he knew she needed any warmth he could provide. "What's your name, madam?" "Olivia," she managed between sobs. "Olivia Gardner. We were headed to North Platte. She looked around at the unfamiliar landscape. How far are we from town? About 3 miles northwest, Zachary replied, scanning the riverbank for any sign of her husband. I've got a camp about a half-mile from here. Can you walk? You need to get warm and dry, and we should have someone check on the baby. Olivia nodded, though her entire body trembled with cold and shock. When she tried to stand, her legs buckled beneath her. Without hesitation, Zachary scooped her into his arms. I'm Zachary Keller, he said, carrying her carefully away from the river's edge. Most folks just call me Zach. Thank you for saving us, Mr. Keller, Olivia whispered, her hand resting protectively over her belly as she leaned against his bare chest. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You stay alive, he replied simply. Both of you. As Zachary carried Olivia through the scrubby pines toward his camp, he felt a strange stirring in his chest, a protective instinct that went beyond mere duty. This woman and her unborn child had been entrusted to him by fate, and something deep inside told him their paths had crossed for a reason greater than mere chance. The small camp Zachary had established consisted of little more than a lean-to shelter covered with canvas, a small fire pit, and his bedroll. He gently lowered Olivia onto the bedroll and stoked the banked coals of his morning fire back to life. My saddlebags have a dry shirt and blanket, he explained, moving efficiently around the camp. It's not much, but it'll help get you warm. Olivia sat motionless, staring at the growing flames. The reality of her situation was beginning to settle over her like a heavy shroud. Her husband was gone, her wagon and all their possessions lost to the river. She was alone, pregnant, and miles from the town where they'd planned to start their new life. Here, Zachary said, offering her a worn flannel shirt and a woolen blanket. You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. Olivia clutched the dry garments, suddenly aware of her predicament. I can't. Understanding dawned in Zachary's eyes. I'll turn my back, he said, already moving away. Call when you're decent. When Olivia had changed into his shirt, which hung like a tent over her pregnant form, and wrapped herself in the blanket, she called softly to Zachary. He returned with a tin cup of water. Drink this. You need it after all that river water you swallowed. She accepted the cup with trembling hands. What am I going to do? The question was barely audible, directed more at herself than at him. Zachary squatted down beside her, his expression serious. First, we make sure you and the little one are all right. Then I'll take you into North Platte. They've got a doctor there, and I know some good people who'll help you get sorted. But I have nothing, Olivia said, tears welling in her eyes again. Everything we owned was in that wagon. You're alive, Zachary reminded her gently. And so is your baby. That's what matters right now. As the morning wore on, Olivia's shock gave way to a dull, throbbing grief. While Zachary prepared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, she told him about Thomas, about their dreams of starting a new life in North Platte, where he had planned to open a carpentry shop. They'd been married just over a year, the baby a blessing they hadn't expected so soon. He was so happy about becoming a father, she said softly, staring into the fire. He'd already made a cradle. Zachary listened silently, understanding the need to speak of those lost. He'd done the same after the war, reciting the names of fallen comrades like a prayer. By midday, Olivia felt strong enough to travel. Zachary saddled his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, and fashioned a more comfortable seat from his bedroll. I'll walk alongside, he explained, helping her onto the horse. We should reach town before sundown. As they set off toward North Platte, Olivia realized she hadn't asked Zachary anything about himself. Are you from around here, Mr. Keller? Zach, he corrected, leading the horse carefully through the uneven terrain. No, madam, Originally from Missouri, came west after the war, been working cattle mostly but taking some time to hunt before spring roundup. You fought in the war. Zachary nodded once, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly. Union cavalry, 3 years. Something in his tone told Olivia not to press further. Instead, she asked, "Do you have family in North Platte?" "No family anywhere," he replied without self-pity. "Just me and Copper here." The journey to North Platte proceeded slowly, with Zachary stopping frequently to ensure Olivia was comfortable. By late afternoon, the simple wood and brick buildings of the frontier town came into view. Though barely more than a wide spot on the Union Pacific Line, North Platte represented civilization and hope. Zachary headed straight for a modest clapboard building with a sign reading Dr. James Whitman, physician. The doctor, a balding man in his 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, ushered them in immediately upon hearing of Olivia's ordeal. "The baby seems to be doing fine," Dr. Whitman announced after examining Olivia. "Strong heartbeat. But you, Mrs. Gardner, need rest and proper nourishment. That was quite an ordeal for both of you." "Where can she stay, Doc?" Zachary asked, standing awkwardly by the door, his hat in his hands. "She's lost everything in the river." Dr. Whitman stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Mrs. Abernathy runs a boarding house on Pine Street. She's a good woman, might have a room available, but—" He glanced at Olivia with concern. "I have no money," Olivia admitted, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "My husband carried our savings." "I'll pay for her board," Zachary said without hesitation, "for as long as she needs." Both Olivia and the doctor looked at him in surprise. "That's very generous, Mr. Keller," Dr. Whitman said, "but it could be quite some time before Mrs. Gardner is situated." "I didn't pull her from that river just to abandon her now," Zachary replied firmly. "I've been saving my wages. This is a better use for them than poker and whiskey." Olivia's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "I can't accept such charity, Mr. Keller. I'll find work, in your condition." Zachary shook his head firmly. "No, madam. You focus on keeping that baby healthy. We'll figure out the rest." Dr. Whitman nodded approvingly. "Let me send my boy over to Mrs. Abernathy's to inquire about a room. In the meantime, Mrs. Gardner should rest here." While the doctor's son ran the errand, Zachary excused himself to tend to his horse and take care of some business. He returned an hour later with a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Some necessities," he explained, handing the package to Olivia. "Just until you can get properly outfitted." Inside, Olivia found a plain but well-made dress, a nightgown, and some basic toiletries. Fresh tears sprang to her eyes at this unexpected kindness. "Mr. Keller, this is too much, Zach," he corrected again, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "And it's nothing, really. Mrs. Abernathy," a plump widow with silver hair and a no-nonsense manner, arrived personally to escort Olivia to the boarding house. "You poor dear," she clucked, assessing Olivia with shrewd but kind eyes. "Don't you worry about a thing. We'll have you settled in no time." Before leaving with Mrs. Abernathy, Olivia turned to Zachary. "I don't know how to thank you for all you've done." The cowboy shifted uncomfortably. "No need for thanks. Just doing what's right." "Will I see you again?" The question slipped out before Olivia could consider its propriety. After all, she was a widow of only a few hours. Something flickered in Zachary's blue eyes. "I'll check in on you tomorrow, make sure you're settled proper." He tipped his hat and stepped back, watching as Mrs. Abernathy led Olivia away. True to his word, Zachary appeared at the boarding house the following afternoon. Olivia had spent the morning in bed on Mrs. Abernathy's insistence, and the rest had done her good. Dressed in the simple blue cotton dress he'd purchased, she received him in the small parlor. "You look better," he observed, the relief evident in his voice. Got some color back. Thanks to you, Olivia said softly. Mrs. Abernathy told me you paid for a month's board in advance. Zachary glanced away, uncomfortable with the acknowledgement of his generosity. Figured it would give you time to get your bearings. It's more than generous, Mr. Keller, Zach, she corrected herself. But I can't continue to accept such charity. I need to find a way to support myself and my baby. There'll be time enough for that after the little one arrives, he said firmly. For now, you rest and get strong. Over the next few days, Zachary visited regularly, each time bringing small gifts, fresh fruit from the general store, a shawl for the cool spring evenings, a book to pass the time. He was unfailingly polite, never staying longer than propriety allowed, but Olivia found herself looking forward to his visits with increasing anticipation. A week after the river accident, Zachary arrived with a more substantial offering, a wooden cradle, simple but beautifully crafted. I remembered you said your husband was making one, he explained, setting it down in her room with careful hands. Thought you might still want one ready. Olivia ran her fingers over the smooth wood, tears spilling down her cheeks. Did you make this? Zachary nodded, a flush creeping up his tanned neck. Used to help my pa in his workshop before the war. Still remember a thing or two. It's beautiful, she whispered. Thank you. As the weeks passed, Olivia came to learn more about the taciturn cowboy who had saved her life. Born on a small farm outside Springfield, Missouri, Zachary had joined the Union Army at 18, fighting with distinction in the cavalry until the war's end. Unable to face returning to a home filled with memories of family lost to the conflict, he had drifted west, working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, before finding somewhat steady employment with a rancher outside North Platte. Olivia shared her own story in Return Her Childhood in Ohio, meeting Thomas when he came to build her father's new barn, their whirlwind courtship and marriage, and the decision to seek their fortune further west. With each conversation, the bond between them grew stronger, though neither acknowledged the subtle shift from gratitude to friendship to something deeper. As Olivia's pregnancy advanced, the women of North Platte rallied around her. Mrs. Abernathy treated her like a daughter. The doctor's wife brought hand-me-down baby clothes, and the minister's wife organized a small charity fund to help the poor widow Gardner until she could find suitable work. Through it all, Zachary remained her steadfast champion, visiting whenever his work allowed, often bringing small presents or simply offering his quiet company. Though he never spoke of it directly, Olivia sensed his growing attachment to her and the baby she carried. One evening in late July, as they sat on the boarding house porch enjoying a rare cool breeze, Zachary finally broached the subject of the future. Been thinking, he said, his deep voice unusually hesitant. Baby's due soon. Olivia nodded, her hand resting on her now prominent belly. Just a few more weeks, Dr. Whitman thinks. You've made plans. Zachary kept his eyes on the horizon, where the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and pink. Mrs. Abernathy says I can stay on and help with the cooking and cleaning once I'm able, Olivia replied. It won't pay much, but she'll let me keep the room for reduced rent. Zachary nodded slowly, still not looking at her. That's a kindness. What about you? Olivia asked, sensing there was more he wanted to say. Will you stay in North Platte after the summer? His hands tightened on the porch railing. Depends. On what? Finally, he turned to face her, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. On you, Olivia. Her heart skipped a beat at the raw emotion in his voice. I know it's too soon, he continued. I know you're still mourning Thomas. But I can't help how I feel. He took a deep breath. I've grown to care for you and for the little one. Olivia's hand trembled as she reached for his. Zach, you don't have to say anything now, he hurried on. Just know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd be honored to take care of you both. Properly, as a husband should. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. In the month since losing Thomas, she had come to rely on Zachary's steady presence, his quiet strength. And yes, there were feelings growing in her heart that both frightened and exhilarated her. I don't know what to say, she whispered honestly. Don't say anything yet, he replied, gently squeezing her hand before releasing it. Just think on it. I'm a patient man. Before Olivia could formulate a response, she gasped suddenly, her hand flying to her belly. What is it? Alarm flashed across Zachary's face. The baby, Olivia managed through clenched teeth. Something's wrong, it's too early. Within minutes, Zachary had carried her to Dr. Whitman's office, his face grim with concern as the doctor examined her. Premature labor, Dr. Whitman announced, his expression serious. Likely brought on by the trauma of the accident. We need to try to stop it if possible. For the next 12 hours, Olivia battled to keep her baby safe within her womb. Zachary refused to leave, pacing the doctor's waiting room through the night, deaf to Mrs. Whitman's suggestions that he get some rest. As dawn broke over North Platte, Dr. Whitman emerged from the examination room, wiping his hands on a towel. The contractions have stopped for now, he informed Zachary. But she needs complete bed rest until the baby comes. Any exertion could trigger labor again, and the child is still too small to have the best chance. Can I see her? Zachary asked, his voice rough from the sleepless night. Dr. Whitman nodded. Briefly, she needs rest. Olivia lay pale against the white sheets, her hands protectively cradling her belly. When Zachary entered, she managed a weak smile. We're all right, she assured him. For now. Zachary knelt beside the bed, taking her hand in his much larger one. You scared me half to death. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, he said firmly. Just focus on staying well, both of you. He hesitated, then added softly, I meant what I said last night, Olivia. Whatever you need, whatever happens, I'm here. Tears welled in her eyes. Why, Zach, you owe me nothing. It's not about owing, he said simply. It's about loving. The word hung in the air between them, both startling and inevitable. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she studied his face, the strong jaw now shadowed with stubble, the clear blue eyes that held hers without wavering. I don't expect anything in return, he continued quietly. Just want you to know where I stand. Before she could respond, Dr. Whitman returned, firmly shooing Zachary out so Olivia could rest. But as he left, she caught his hand one last time. Come back tomorrow, she asked softly, his face softened. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. For the next 2 weeks, Olivia remained confined to bed at the boarding house, with Mrs. Abernathy and the other women taking turns sitting with her. Zachary visited each evening after his work at the ranch was done, sometimes reading to her from the newspaper, sometimes just sitting quietly beside her bed, his presence a comfort in itself. On a hot August night, Olivia woke to real labor pains, stronger and more insistent than before. Mrs. Abernathy sent for both the doctor and Zachary, who arrived breathless and worried just as Dr. Whitman was ushering him out again. Women's business now, Mr. Keller, the doctor said firmly. Nothing for you to do but wait. The labor lasted through the night and into the morning. Olivia's cries occasionally piercing the closed door and sending Zachary pacing the length of Mrs. Abernathy's parlor like a caged animal. When a particularly agonized scream rang out, he nearly broke down the door before the boarding house owner's son intercepted him. My ma says that's normal, the boy assured him. Says it means the baby's almost here. Shortly after, a different cry filled the boarding house, the thin, indignant wail of a newborn. Zachary froze, his heart hammering in his chest. Minutes later, Mrs. Abernathy emerged, her apron stained but her face wreathed in smiles. "A beautiful baby girl," she announced. "Small but strong, lunged as you can hear." "And Olivia?" Zachary demanded. "Tired but well," Mrs. Abernathy assured him. "She's asking for you." When Zachary entered the room, Olivia was propped against the pillows, her face exhausted but radiant as she cradled a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet her," Olivia whispered. "Come meet Emma Grace." Zachary approached hesitantly, overwhelmed by the scene before him. The tiny infant had a shock of dark hair and a pink, wrinkled face that was currently scrunched in sleep. "She's perfect," he breathed, carefully perching on the edge of the bed. "Just like her mother." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I've been thinking about what you said, Zach. About being here for us." He went still, hardly daring to breathe. "I can't make any promises right now," she continued softly. "It's all so fresh, so new, but I know that when I imagine our future Emmas and mine, you're in it." Zachary swallowed hard. "That's enough for now," he said hoarsely. "More than enough." In a gesture that felt both innocent and profound, he reached out one calloused finger to gently stroke the baby's cheek. Emma stirred slightly but didn't wake. "She knows you," Olivia whispered. "She's comfortable with you already." Over the next few months, Zachary proved himself as devoted to Emma as he was to her mother. Though he maintained his room at the modest boarding house for single men, he spent every free moment at Mrs. Abernathy's, bringing small gifts for the baby and much-needed supplies for Olivia. As autumn painted the Nebraska plains in golds and russets, Olivia gradually recovered her strength. Emma, though small at birth, thrived under the loving care of her mother and the adoring attention of the man who had appointed himself their protector. By October, Olivia felt well enough to take short walks through town with Emma bundled against her chest in a sling Mrs. Abernathy had fashioned. On one such outing, she encountered Zachary in animated conversation with North Platte's only banker, Harold Montgomery. "Olivia." Zachary called when he spotted her, his face lighting up as it always did in her presence. "Just the person I wanted to see." "Mrs. Gardner," the banker greeted her with a tip of his hat. "You're looking well. And how is the little one?" "Growing stronger every day," Olivia replied, carefully shifting the sling to reveal Emma's sleeping face. "Beautiful child," Mr. Montgomery commented. "Well, I'll leave you two to talk. Think about what I said, Keller. It's a solid opportunity." As the banker walked away, Olivia raised a questioning eyebrow at Zachary. "Opportunity?" A hint of excitement colored his usually stoic expression. "There's a small property available just outside town. 10 acres with a cabin, needs some work but it's solid. Good water supply, decent grazing land." "You're thinking of buying it?" Olivia asked, surprised. Zachary had never mentioned wanting his own place before. He nodded, suddenly looking almost shy. "Been saving most of my wages. Mr. Montgomery says I've got enough for a down payment, and the owner's willing to carry the note for the rest." "That's wonderful, Zach," Olivia said sincerely. "You deserve a place of your own after all your years of working for others." "Thing is," he said, his voice dropping lower as he stepped closer, "I wasn't thinking of it as just my place." Olivia's heart began to beat faster. "Oh, been almost 4 months since Emma came," he said carefully. "I know you said you needed time, and I respect that. But I also want you to know my intentions haven't changed." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Olivia. You and Emma both. And if you'd consider it, I want to marry you and give that little girl my name." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. In the months since Thomas's death, she had moved through grief to acceptance, and in the process, her feelings for Zachary had deepened into something she could no longer deny was love. "The property would be a place for us," Zachary continued when she didn't immediately respond. A real home. I know it's not much, but it sounds perfect, Olivia interrupted softly, hope flared in his eyes. Does that mean? Yes, she whispered, if you're sure about taking on a ready-made family. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Zachary said, his voice rough with emotion. You two are all I want in this world. Mindful of the baby between them and the public street where they stood, Zachary restrained himself to taking Olivia's free hand and raising it to his lips in a gesture that was both tender and reverent. When? He asked simply. Soon, Olivia replied, her heart full to bursting. Before winter sets in. They were married 2 weeks later in North Platt's small church, with Emma cooing in Mrs. Abernathy's arms and most of the town in attendance. The ceremony was simple, the bride's dress borrowed, but the joy in both their faces as they spoke their vows was genuine and deep. That evening, Zachary carried his new wife and stepdaughter across the threshold of the cabin he now owned. Though rustic, he had worked tirelessly to make it comfortable, installing new glass in the windows, patching the roof, and constructing a proper crib for Emma using the same skilled hands that had crafted her first cradle. Welcome home, Mrs. Keller, he said softly, setting Olivia on her feet in the main room where a fire already blazed in the stone hearth. It's wonderful, Olivia breathed, taking in the simple but clean space. A table with 3 chairs stood in one corner, a rocking chair before the fire, and a curtain separated the main room from what she assumed was the bedroom. It's not much, Zachary said, suddenly anxious. But I'll make it better, I promise. Add on rooms as we need them. Olivia turned to face him, her eyes shining. It's perfect, Zach. It's ours. After settling Emma in her new crib, Olivia returned to find Zachary standing nervously by the fire, his tall frame unusually tense. Are you all right? She asked softly. He turned to her, his expression a mixture of desire and uncertainty. I just want to do right by you, Olivia, in all ways. Understanding his meaning, she stepped closer and placed a hand on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. You already have. From the moment you pulled me from that river. When he lowered his lips to hers, Olivia felt a surge of emotion that washed away the last lingering shadows of grief. This was her future now, this good, honorable man who had risked his life for hers, who loved her child as his own, who looked at her as though she were the most precious thing in his world. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the heavy quilts Mrs. Abernathy had given them as a wedding gift, Zachary traced gentle fingers along Olivia's cheek. Happy, he whispered. More than I ever thought possible again, she answered truthfully. I keep thinking about that day at the river, he confessed. How close I came to not finding you in time. Olivia pressed a kiss to his palm. But you did find me. You saved us both. No, he said, drawing her closer. You saved me too. I was just drifting before, not really living. Now I have something to live for. As winter descended on North Platte, the Kellers settled into their new life together. Zachary continued working at the ranch, but with an eye toward eventually running cattle on his own land. Olivia kept house and cared for Emma, who grew stronger and more curious by the day. Their first Christmas as a family was simple but joyous. Zachary had carved wooden toys for Emma and fashioned a delicate hair comb for Olivia from a piece of buffalo bone. Olivia had knitted him a warm scarf and baked his favorite apple pie with precious sugar she'd been hoarding for weeks. As they sat before the fire that night, Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib, Olivia leaned against her husband's strong shoulder. I never expected to find love again, she said softly. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. Zachary's arm tightened around her. I never expected to find love at all, he admitted. The war, it changed me, made me think I wasn't meant for a normal life. And now, he smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Now I know better. This you and Emma, this is what I was always meant for. Spring brought new beginnings to the Keller homestead. Zachary purchased 2 milk cows and a small flock of chickens, and with help from friends from town, expanded the cabin to include a proper bedroom for Emma and a larger kitchen for Olivia. The garden she planted flourished in the rich Nebraska soil, promising vegetables for both fresh eating and preserving for the winter ahead. As the anniversary of their meeting approached, Zachary grew mysteriously busy with a project he refused to let Olivia see, working late into the evening in the small shed behind the house. Just a little longer, he promised, whenever she asked about the mysterious hammering and sawing. You'll see it when it's ready. On the exact day he had pulled her from the North Platte River 1 year earlier, Zachary blindfolded Olivia and led her carefully from the house. "This is silly," she laughed, holding onto his arm. "I can hear Emma fussing, Mrs. Abernathy has her for the afternoon," Zachary assured her. "Remember, she came out special to watch her." "But why patience, wife?" he chuckled. "Almost there." When he removed the blindfold, Olivia gasped in delight. Before her stood a small covered wagon, not unlike the one she had been traveling in when disaster struck, but smaller and more elegantly built. The wood gleamed with fresh paint, and the canvas cover was clean and taut. "Zach," she breathed. "It's beautiful, but—" "Not for traveling," he assured her quickly, understanding her momentary flash of fear. "For picnics, for taking Emma to town in bad weather, for hauling supplies." He squeezed her hand. "I thought it was time to make new memories with a wagon, better ones." Tears of happiness sprang to Olivia's eyes as she threw her arms around his neck. "It's perfect. You're perfect." "Hardly that," he laughed, lifting her off her feet in a warm embrace. "But I try." That afternoon, they took the wagon on its maiden voyage, a short journey to a pretty spot by a small tributary of the North Platte, safely distant from the main river. There, on a blanket beneath the cottonwood trees, they shared a picnic lunch and watched the gentle flow of the water. "Strange how water can bring both tragedy and blessing," Olivia mused, her head resting in Zachary's lap as Emma played with a wooden rattle nearby. "That river took Thomas from me, but it also brought you into our lives." "I think about that too," Zachary admitted, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "How the worst day of your life somehow led to the best days of mine." He hesitated. "Does that make me a selfish man?" Olivia sat up, taking his face between her palms. "It makes you human, Zach. Thomas would want me to be happy, to have someone who loves me and Emma. I believe that with all my heart." As if in agreement, Emma let out a happy gurgle and crawled toward them, her dark curls bouncing with each movement. "Come here, little wildflower," Zachary laughed, scooping her up and settling her on his knee. At 10 months old, Emma had her mother's brown eyes but a determined chin that reminded Olivia of her new father rather than her birth one. "Da," Emma proclaimed, patting Zachary's cheek with a chubby hand. Both adults froze, exchanging startled glances. Did she just? Olivia began. "Da," Emma repeated proudly, clearly pleased with the reaction her new word had generated. Zachary's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "Is that all right?" he asked Olivia hoarsely. "That she calls me that, of course it is," Olivia whispered, her own eyes moist. "You are her father in every way that matters." That night, after Emma was sleeping soundly in her crib, Olivia and Zachary sat on the small porch of their cabin, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "I have something to tell you," Olivia said softly, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Hum." Zachary murmured, content and relaxed after their perfect day. Emma's going to have a brother or sister come winter." Zachary went utterly still beside her, then turned so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. "Olivia, are you certain?" She nodded, her face illuminated by the glow from the window. Dr. Whitman confirmed it yesterday. A whoop of pure joy escaped Zachary's throat as he lifted Olivia from her chair and spun her around on the porch. "A baby, our baby," Olivia laughed. "You'll wake Emma and probably half the county with that yell." Zachary set her carefully on her feet but kept his arms around her. "Are you happy about it?" he asked, suddenly serious. "After what happened last time?" "I'm a little frightened," she admitted. "But Dr. Whitman says there's no reason to expect complications. And this time I'll have you with me from the start. Every step of the way," he promised fervently. "Whatever you need, whatever happens, I'm here." The months passed in a blur of activity as they prepared for the new addition to their family. Zachary added another bedroom to the cabin and traded one of his prized rifles for a larger cookstove that would better heat the expanded space. Olivia sewed tiny garments from flour sacks and knitted booties and blankets during the long autumn evenings. Emma, blossoming into an active toddler, seemed to understand that something momentous was happening. She would pat Olivia's growing belly and say, "Baby," in her sweet, serious voice. "That's right, Wildflower," Zachary would tell her, swinging her onto his shoulders. "You're going to be a big sister soon." As Olivia's time grew near, an early winter storm blanketed North Platte in deep snow. Zachary fretted about the possibility of not being able to fetch the doctor when the time came, but Olivia remained calm. "Women have been having babies without doctors for thousands of years," she reminded him. "And Mrs. Abernathy has delivered more babies than Dr. Whitman anyway." Nevertheless, when the first pains began on a cold December night, Zachary insisted on riding into town for both the doctor and the motherly boarding house owner. He returned with both, plus supplies, barely an hour later, having pushed his horse to its limits through the snowy darkness. Unlike Emma's difficult early arrival, this birth proceeded smoothly and relatively quickly. As dawn broke on December 12, 1868, Zachary Keller became the proud father of a robust baby boy with a shock of dark hair and a lusty cry that announced his arrival to the world. "He has your eyes," Olivia whispered tiredly as Zachary held his son for the first time, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the tiny bundle. "And your chin. What shall we name him?" Zachary asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought perhaps Thomas Zachary," Olivia suggested softly. "To honor both his fathers." Zachary's eyes filled with tears of gratitude for this generous acknowledgement of the man who had come before him. "Thomas Zachary Keller," he said, testing the name. "It's perfect." The first months with the new baby were a blur of sleepless nights and busy days as the family adjusted to their expanded number. Little Thomas, called TZ by his father, proved to have his father's hearty constitution and his mother's sweet disposition, rarely fussing except when hungry. Emma, now nearly 2, took her role as big sister seriously, bringing her favorite toys to show the baby and insisting on helping Olivia with his care as much as her small hands allowed. By spring, the Kellers had settled into a comfortable routine. Zachary had arranged to work fewer days at the ranch, using the extra time to improve their own property, expanding the chicken coop, breaking new ground for a larger garden, and building a proper barn for the milk cows and the 2 horses they now owned. On a warm May evening, as they sat on their expanded porch watching Emma chase fireflies in the yard while baby Thomas dozed in Olivia's arms, Zachary reflected on the twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. "I was thinking about that day again," he said quietly. "At the river." Olivia nodded, understanding immediately. They rarely spoke of it now, but she knew it was never far from either of their minds, that pivotal moment when tragedy and salvation had converged. "I remember looking down from the bluff and seeing the wagon tip," Zachary continued. "I remember thinking I might not reach you in time. And then, when I got to you in the water, feeling your belly and realizing you were carrying a child." He shook his head. "I've never been so scared or so determined in all my life." "You were our miracle," Olivia said softly, reaching for his hand. "Emma's and mine." "No," Zachary replied, bringing her fingers to his lips. "You were mine. I was just drifting through life, moving from place to place, never putting down roots. That river brought me my purpose, my family." He gazed at Thomas's sleeping face, then at Emma dancing in the twilight. "Everything that matters." As the years passed, the Keller family flourished along with their homestead. Zachary eventually left ranch work to focus entirely on their own growing herd of cattle. Olivia started a small business selling preserves and baked goods to the general store in town. Emma grew into a thoughtful, bookish girl with her mother's gentle spirit and her stepfather's determined chin. Thomas became his father's shadow, learning the ways of cattle and horses from the time he could walk. In 1871, they welcomed another daughter, Sarah Jane, who arrived with her mother's golden hair and a temperament that could only be described as forceful from her first breath. 2 years later, William Robert joined the family, completing their brood with his merry laugh and mischievous nature. North Platte grew from a frontier outpost to a proper town, with a school that all the Keller children attended and a new church where the family occupied the same pew each Sunday. The original 10 acres expanded to 40, then 80 as Zachary's careful management and hard work paid off. The small cabin grew too, with additions and improvements until it resembled a proper farmhouse, complete with a parlor where Olivia's prized possession, a piano purchased after years of saving, took pride of place. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Olivia with a gold locket containing miniature portraits of their 4 children. "For the mother who made our family complete," he said, as he fastened it around her neck. Olivia touched the locket reverently, then cupped his weathered cheek with her hand. "For the father who saved us all." That night, after the children were asleep, they walked hand in hand to the small tributary where they had picnicked on their first anniversary. The moon silvered the gentle flow of water, so different from the raging current that had nearly claimed Olivia's life all those years ago. "Any regrets?" Zachary asked softly, his arm around her waist as they stood on the grassy bank. "Not a one," Olivia replied truthfully. "Every hardship led us here to this life, to each other." She turned in his arms to face him. "And you, do you ever wish for the freedom of your bachelor days?" Zachary laughed, the sound rich and warm in the night air. "Freedom? I was never free until I found you, Olivia, just lost." He drew her closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Thank you for giving me a home, a purpose, a family to love." "Thank you for diving into that river," she replied simply, "for being brave enough to risk everything for a stranger." "Best risk I ever took," he said, lowering his lips to hers in a kiss that still held all the tenderness and passion of their first. Above them, stars wheeled in the vast Nebraska sky, bearing witness to a love born from tragedy, tempered by challenge and strengthened by the shared journey of building a life together. The river that had brought them together continued its eternal flow, carrying away the past and nourishing the future that stretched before them, boundless with possibility and rich with love. On the occasion of their 25th wedding anniversary, with their children grown and the first grandchildren beginning to arrive, Zachary and Olivia stood once more on the banks of the North Platte River. Though they were no longer young silver, threaded Zachary's dark hair and laugh lines, crinkled the corners of Olivia's eyes. The love between them had only deepened with the passing years. "Hard to believe it's been a quarter-century since that day," Zachary mused, his arm around Olivia's waist as they gazed at the flowing water. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Olivia replied softly. "Other times like another lifetime entirely." Emma, now a poised young woman of 25 and recently married to the town doctor's son, approached with her husband. "What are you two reminiscing about now?" she teased gently. "The day your father pulled your mother from the river," Thomas answered, joining them with his wife and infant son. At 24, he was the spitting image of Zachary in his youth, tall and broad-shouldered, with the same clear blue eyes. "That old story again," Sarah Jane laughed, linking arms with her newest beau. At 18, she was the beauty of the family, with numerous suitors vying for her attention. "It's not just a story," 16-year-old William said seriously. "It's our beginning." Zachary smiled at his youngest son, proud of the thoughtful young man he was becoming. "That's exactly right, Will. If not for that river, none of you would be here." As the extended family gathered for a picnic on the riverbank, a tradition started on that first anniversary so long ago. Olivia found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. From the darkest day of her life had come all this joy, all these beloved faces. Zachary seemed to read her thoughts, as he often did after so many years together. He squeezed her hand and whispered, "Worth it, all of it." "Every moment," she agreed, leaning against the steady strength of the man who had not only saved her life, but had helped her build a new one richer and fuller than she could ever have imagined on that desperate day when the river had nearly claimed her. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting golden light across the flowing water, Olivia and Zachary stood hand in hand, surrounded by the family they had created together, living proof that even the most terrible tragedy could become the gateway to the greatest blessing of all. A love that not only endured but flourished, growing stronger with each passing year, each shared joy, each challenge faced together. And the river flowed on, as it had for centuries, and would for centuries more, a constant reminder of both the fragility and the resilience of life, and of the unexpected ways that destiny sometimes worked to bring two souls together across the swirling currents of fate.